This is week 6. We're studying, do corporations have the same free speech rights as persons? And let me say on the onset, this is going to be one of those slideshows. It's going to have some pretty intense amounts of text. So you'll need to pause it and read the definitions, but I'm not going to take the time to read them because I want to get through the whole thing. So let's move on to the next slide. It's important to understand what is a corporation. Basically, it's an entity that shields the owners from debt, but in so doing, it creates this sort of entity that you'll hear the term natural person. Of course, that's not a corporation, but it implies that maybe it is an unnatural person, but it is in fact a person by that legal definition. So the case Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. There's a law called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, which basically tries to restrict what we call electioneering. If you ever think about your local elections when you go to vote, there usually is a law that says that you cannot be within a certain number of feet of the polling place with campaign literature. That's called electioneering. So the idea of the electioneering in this case was that certain communication could not be funded either by unions or by corporations within a certain period of an election day. And Citizens United came up with this movie they called Hillary the Movie as a documentary, and they claimed that they were not electioneering. They were simply running a documentary, and the fact that it happened to occur within that period is just simply consequential. Eventually, the Supreme Court agreed with them and said that there really is nothing that would be an abridgment of the free speech of that particular corporation. There are only 3 slides today, and this is the 3rd one, but I wanted to spend some time on this. The question is, what is the problem with a corporation running these things? Well, first of all, if a corporation can run on its own, for example, the movie, Hillary the Movie, that was obviously, or at least by some people, they would say that that would have benefited the opposition. In that case, it would have been, well, it was during a primary, but if that was to be, let's say that Hillary were to get were to be the nominee to run as a Democratic candidate, and that movie were to run during her during that period, it would have the effect of being a positive effect for her opposition, whomever that may be. So the question is, could that be used? Could there be behind the scenes cooperation? Because as a candidate, I might be limited by a certain amount of money, how much money I can take in, but if there's a corporation out there running ads on my behalf, what do I care? So the question is, am I cooperating? But that has a downside too. If a corporation were to run ads supposedly in my favor, but in fact were so nasty that it turned people against me, how is that good? So there's that question as well, and it can work against you. And it also raises the question, what about the rest of us? Look, in the state, any state, you can, depending on the state, you can spend $50 to $100 and start your own corporation. You don't have to have an attorney to do that. You may need one to understand what you're doing, but the real question is, do you have the same financial resources that, say, a great big corporation like General Motors would have? And if not, is that fair? But at the same time, what is fair? Who decides what is fair? And is there a certain line that says this amount of money is not acceptable, but this is? And that's what we try to do with campaign finance. The question I hear often is, does this lead to an oligarchy? That is, a type of government that's led by people who have means, a small group of people. And you hear this thrown around on the web a lot. To that I would respond that when we were first deciding whether or not to accept this new Constitution, James Madison made a point that we are so numerous, which wasn't that numerous at the time, as a population, that there's no way that any one group will ever be able to take over the nation. And while there are a lot of people on one side with money, there are a lot of people on the other just as well. So in my opinion, that's probably not an issue.